different approach that needs to be taken to make sure that you bump that number out of the, as I said, often in kind of 60% rather than 80%?
Yeah, and we're working now with 100 local authorities, in fact, a bit more than that, precisely because, as you say, you need a combination of the two. And the really smart contact tracing system that we need to build together is one where we're targeting the right approach for the right groups of people. Because, as I say, this is actually a very time-limited job. It's really important that we reach people quickly. So you don't want to go through multiple different stages, and you need to use both digital, well, all of digital, local, and the scale that you can deploy nationally. And we've worked very closely with Andy and his team over the last few months. The Greater Manchester was one of the first parts of the country to start piloting local contact tracing. So I really firmly believe the answer lies in that combo. And if you look at other countries that have only got a local system, they've had to suspend contact tracing because the volumes have got too great. Right. So we need to do all. It's not an either or.
And then, Dido, will you talk about this isolate question? You probably have a better grip, at least I hope so, on what the percentage of people who do get contacted then follow through and isolate.
Yeah, well, this is one of the hardest sort of analytical questions to answer because, of course, thankfully, we live in a democracy and we don't track people all the time. So you're relying on surveying and asking people what they've done. And one person's interpretation of abiding by isolation, but they took the dog for a quick walk at midnight, whereas another person's interpretation is that they broke isolation because they went to a party. So it's quite hard to give you a really clear, definitive answer. But what we do see is that people try really hard. It's very difficult to isolate for 14 days, particularly if you don't feel ill and particularly if you're struggling to make ends meet. So I am pleased that we now have a substantial financial support package. So £500 for people if they need to isolate, whether they're the index cases tested positive or contacts. Local councils across the country are working really hard to put in the right support packages for people who need help getting shopping or on other responsibilities. So that's something, again, that is a local and national partnership. And we make really, our contact tracers, when they contact people, are signposting people to that support in their local area. But I think you actually do hit on an issue where employers have an important role to play too, in encouraging people to abide by the rules rather than making them feel guilty or stigmatizing them that they have to isolate. Because the only way we will beat this virus is if we break those chains of transmission. And that is the place where I think we've all got to work harder. Test and trace only works if people come forward for testing and if people actually obey the isolation. And that will only happen if we all work together on it.
And Dido, what are you seeing? Frances O'Grady was here early this afternoon. I think she's worried, Frances O'Grady from the TUC, as you know, is worried about the financial support and certain people just saying, look, I just can't in all good conscience make that economic decision given the needs of my family. So I appreciate the social demand, but I have to look out for my family. Is the financial support sufficient? And I ask that particularly because I imagine as we increase testing, you may see a greater instance of people who get contacted not just once, twice, but several times. And what kind of support is there for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the financial support is a significant step on where it was 3 weeks ago. So I think it's a bit early days to be able to, 5 weeks ago, I'm getting my time goes on. It's a bit early days to be able to really measure the impact of what is a substantial payment and that has been benchmarked to be, a fair payment for people who are struggling financially. I totally understand where Frances is coming from, but it's a big step on from where we were in the summer and it benchmarks well across other jurisdictions. So I think that's a good start. But I'd also encourage all employers to look out for their own people. The way that your line boss behaves is going to go a long way towards how you respond when you're in isolation. And I know it's scary. I know the worry is we do more testing, more people turn up positive, and you risk the functioning of your business. But actually, all our experience is the opposite. that the more testing you do, and if you look at social care, for example, where we've been testing all staff in adult social care every week now since the summer, and what we've seen is infection rates in what was a group that had some of the higher infection rates of the population have managed to stay much lower than they otherwise would have been. And not only is that a brilliant thing for protecting the most vulnerable in our care homes, but it also shows you that regular testing in the workplace can keep the virus out of the workplace and keep your business going.
So, and Dido, I want to go back to your point. You're saying what we do with this 4 weeks and how we plan for our exit from the lockdown. You know, a lot of people at this conference have been saying we've got to use this time so we make the most of the months that follow. Can I just follow up on a few of those issues? The first is some people are saying that the fact we've gone into a lockdown itself is proof that the combination of testing and local lockdowns doesn't work. Do you think that what we're going to come out of after this lockdown in England is a return to testing and local lockdowns? Do you think it can work?
Well, look, I don't think that there is a single silver bullet to cracking COVID. We're going to have to use all the interventions at our disposal. And the good news is that we know much more about the virus than we did in February, March time. So we go into this national lockdown much more knowledgeable and able to build on what we've already got. So I do think we will need our first line of defence, which is our own behaviour, hands, face and space. That is the first line of defence. And whether we're not going to be able to move away from that. We've got to get better at that. Test and trace will scale up, as I said, and we'll get faster and we'll get smarter and we'll get more united in terms of our local and national partnerships. So we'll get better and better. But on its own, I suspect those two won't be enough. We will also need mass testing to drive real scale. We will need, at some point in time, we will see a vaccine come in. We're seeing more and more effective therapeutic treatment of COVID. I see a world where all of these different, I think the Prime Minister called them on Saturday night, the different rays of sunshine. Yeah. Neither of them on their own are the sun, but each of them are rays that should give us hope going forward. And actually all of them require significant private and public collaboration to make them work.
I guess I'm trying to work out, and I think a lot of businesses are trying to work out what world we're headed to after December the 2nd. And are you working towards a version in which we've scaled up testing, but that we return to local lockdowns and tiering? Is that what you expect it will be on the other side of the next 4 weeks?
Well, I think the thing you have to keep coming back to is the science of the way that the virus behaves. And so there are two really key things that we've learned over the last 6 months. The first is asymptomatic transmission. So a lot of people have this disease and don't realise it and spread it, which is why mass testing offers such a big opportunity to find those people who are spreading the disease that we don't realise. The other thing that we've learned about the disease is that some people are much more infectious than others. And so you get outbreaks from so-called super spreaders. And what that means is that local outbreak management is really powerful. And we're unlikely to see the disease follow the same path in every part of the country, which means that local lockdowns, regional action is a much better way of charting a course through the virus than a single sort of blanket approach across the country. That's one of the ways that we balance the short-term health and the medium and long-term health and economic challenges.
Right.
So I do think we'll be in a world where we're wanting to continue to take targeted local action, but I'm optimistic that we will come out of this lockdown with more tools in the toolkit than we have going in.
And Dido, can we talk about the mass testing point you made? You talked about the rollout of the existing swabs, but also these lateral flow tests more like pregnancy tests. One question for business is who pays for these tests? If you're doing mass testing, if they're happening every day, if you're being asked to do them within your company, is the expectation you've got that this will all be covered by the government, by the NHS, or do you expect individuals and companies to pay?
I think, to be really honest, James, at this stage, it's too early to tell. So, we are piloting a mass testing of a whole city with Liverpool, clearly government funded to understand that. And we're all going to be learning how these things work. And a number of companies are already buying testing themselves. And it's important that in a free country we're making the specification and the clinical protocols available. And if individuals and companies want to get ahead, that they're not restricted from doing that. But equally, the service that I lead is an NHS service, and I really firmly believe in our NHS as a free, at the point of need service. So you should expect to see ever-growing scale of NHS test and trace, government-funded testing. So I think we will have, just as we have in healthcare, a mixed economy.
All right, and one final thing. I'm aware that as we think more about vaccines and we hear more from the vaccinologists, we're beginning to realise that the vaccine also won't be a silver bullet, that its efficacy may, we don't know exactly yet how effective it'll be. I'm aware that, Dido, you were asked to help deliver on a quote-unquote moonshot in terms of testing. What realistically do you think we should expect by the end of the first quarter of 2021 in terms of scale of testing in the UK?
Gosh, I don't know, James. The medium term in the life of NHS Test and Trace is sort of 3 weeks' time, right. And delivering a really successful pilot in Liverpool. We're working really hard with schools, with universities, with a number of private sector employers on all of our mass testing pilots. It's too early to be able to give you a sense of the scale and the potential for as far away as the spring. What we are seeing is the pace of innovation and the pace at which it is possible to scale these services up is mind-boggling, really, compared to what any of us have seen in ordinary business life. So I think we should be challenging ourselves to go as fast as possible in the here and now, and more opportunities will unfold as we learn through these pilots.
Dido, thanks. I'm going to come back to Matthew and Lisa. Please stay with us because I want to talk about, I suppose, that kind of team of teams point that you made, which is how everyone is going to work together on it. I'm sure that, Lisa, you'll have been listening to this, thinking to myself, my goodness, what it is to try and coordinate across quite such a scale and at a speed that Dido was describing. But actually, the truth is, in every business, we're all dealing with different versions of how we make these changes. And I just wondered, in a law firm like yours, take BCLP, you must have seen incredible changes in working habits, and you must be thinking about all of these things, how testing, how potential therapies and vaccines might change the future of working. Will you just give us a sort of sense from inside a law firm of what's changed and how ways of working have changed?
Yeah, thank you, James. And I thought that was all very encouraging as well to hear from Dido. And it makes me feel a lot better about the job that I have. I mean, the question would be more what hasn't changed, to be honest with you. It was like the fire alarm went off back in late March, if I focus on the UK part of our firm for now. And everybody sort of, scrambled out of the building. And we haven't really, in large part, been back. I mean, a quick thumbnail sketch on BCLP, and this is just to really make a point that it's not a singular experience because we're an international firm. We're in 12 different countries. We have 31 offices. We, are in different regions within different countries. So we've got 18 offices in America. So there's different situations in different states. Even in the UK, we've got an office in Manchester, and we've got the largest office is actually in London, where we have over 1,000 people. So and 3,000 people globally. So, the only way we've been able to approach it is to try and provide some clarity as much as we can. So we, from the beginning, developed our own framework of phases, 5 phases. Phase 1 being, frankly, the phase we've just moved our London office back to as of tomorrow. Yeah. Which is you can't come in unless the absolute nature of your job requires you to be in. So our front of house staff, our receptionists, our cleaners, our security guards, but otherwise all of our lawyers, all of our secretaries, all of our support staff, they're not allowed to come into the London office at this point in time. Now, it's different in Asia, it's different in some of our US offices, and so we have a global framework, but the key is you have to have local application of it. It hasn't just been a uniform experience that we've imposed on the whole firm. But to go to your point about what's changed, well, lawyers have demonstrated that they can actually work effectively from home in most situations. Not easy when you're in the middle of a trial or a big M&A completion. We are struggling with those situations and allowing lawyers to be in our offices to enable that to happen more effectively. But in terms of the day-to-day, we have learned over the last eight plus months that lawyers can work effectively, advise our clients who are all going through the same experience that we're going through.
And Lisa, what I'm interested in you say, it's interesting to know what hasn't changed. I'm also interested in what hasn't worked, because I don't know whether you spotted, it must be, I think I'm probably like Dido here, I've lost track of time, but at the end of the summer, I noted that Reed Hastings, the chief exec of Netflix, had come out and said, and I think it was music to many people's ears, actually, I don't think anything good comes out of remote working. I just want to get back into the office. And you feel a lot of people feel that way. Amongst your teams of lawyers, amongst teams in the firm, what do they tell you that doesn't work? What can't they do by working remotely?
It's that does resonate. It's a sense of grief, if you like, for the lack of in-person social interaction, that camaraderie, that the wall-to-wall Zoom calls that now fill our days. If it's a 3 o'clock call, you turn up at 3. There's no just sort of wandering into the room, making a cup of tea with colleagues of yours, or the smile that you don't see that means I'm not really okay. The body language that you just can't see on screens, if the cameras are even switched on. I think we're learning to watch for the signs the longer this goes on, of people detaching and disengaging and struggling because they're not switching the cameras on, maybe they're not turning up for the team meetings. People, frankly, are so over the sort of, the Zoom fun, the quizzes, the chocolate tasting, the wine tasting. I mean, that has absolutely its moment, but I think the sense of fatigue, the sense of mourning, the sense of understanding that this isn't going away soon. So a kind of a sense that making do is no longer good enough. This is more than making do. This is learning to live with this experience for a longer period. But it's definitely shone a light on what the purpose of the office is. And I think for the junior colleagues, I absolutely endorse what Carolyn said yesterday. I'm watching, we've had trainees join our London office in September, fresh out of law school, never really spent a meaningful length of time in an office, not able to interact with senior colleagues, haven't established their networks or understanding of how the organisation works. To do that from a kitchen, which they're probably sharing a kitchen table with 3 other trainee lawyers who are in 3 other different law firms, trying to protect the confidentiality of work and learn how to become a lawyer, it's just very hard, to say the least.
And no fun. Matthew, I wanted to pick up on the point